Okay, let's move on to UFOs. There's been a lot of big developments while I was gone. I guess I don't know why he had to have him on during Thanksgiving break, but it is what it is. So Dave Grush, the UFO whistleblower who we've covered here previously, appeared for almost more than 2 hours on the Joe Rogan podcast. He faced a whole bunch of questions. He made some pretty eye-popping claims and also just described some of the things that he alleges that were happening behind the scenes, of which he is blowing the whistle on. The TLDR of it really is that there is a massive scale cover-up in the side of the U.S. government around UFOs, crash retrieval, reverse engineering programs, and a lot more about than what is known to the public. Here's some of what he had to say.
This answers a fundamental question, for humanity. Are we alone, or what happens when we die? Well, I don't know about that, but are we alone? Well, the answer is we're not alone, and I know that with 100% certainty. Which, as an intel officer, you never say 100%, but all things pointed towards, based on the people I talked to, like Harry Reid, and I use him as an example, but I talked to the highest of the high people you could possibly talk to, if you catch my drift. So unless all of them are lying and they're covering up something else, which I don't even know what it would be at this point, because the phenomenon is real. It's been going on for thousands of years. People have been seeing strange things, and not everybody's mass hallucinating. So we're concerned because we think you might have an ongoing mental health issue. I'm like, what are you talking about? I reported that I had PTSD from Afghanistan in my military service several years ago, and I sought help for that. Like I'm not ashamed of that. I'm high functioning autistic, and I didn't know that until my early 30s, and how I process trauma I didn't really understand until many years later. And, I sought help for that, and they were trying to say that, like, I had some secret mental health problem that I haven't been reporting to. So I had to go through this whole process. 3 agencies at the same time investigated me for that, which I don't even know if that's, like, legal. They tried to say that I, like, mishandled classified, all this other stuff. It was insane. Apparently, I was under criminal investigation for a couple months, and I didn't even know that, and nor did they interview me, but they made a finding with no evidence they tried to use against me that I had to spend money to basically litigate and maintain my employment and my clearance, which I did, for the record.
So a couple of interesting things there. Really what he talks about is the retribution that he's faced since from inside the government, in which he's filed a report. But more importantly, about what he alleges that he saw behind the scenes. There was a lot of talk about, well, you say you can say this, how come you can't say that? And and that's really where I think some of Rogan's best questioning came in. He's like, look, what's really going on here? So before we even break it down for you, Rogan himself addressed whether he believed it or not. Here's what he had to say.
It's hard to say, man. The thing about it is, I believe he's telling the truth as far as what he's experienced and the documents that he uncovered and the people that he talked to. But how do you know whether or not they're just using him as a useful idiot to just get out some silly story because they're covering up for the fact that there's some very advanced drone system that the United States government has they're trying to keep under wraps?
Right.
It might be
Tough
both.
to know.
I think it's probably both things. My theory is that they have this ability to make something move in this insane way with gravity, but they can't put a body in it and they can't put weapons in it. They can't. It's just an object that they can get to move at insane rates of speed. That's what I think. I think the military applications of this thing have yet to be figured out. But I think they do have something that can do things that we have no knowledge of. But the United States government is probably have in their possession something that was either back engineered from something from somewhere else or something that they developed in a completely top secret environment.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So I'll break it down for you.
Yeah.
I disagree with Rogan, and I'll tell you why, which is, and this was actually, I believe some of this was laid out on his show as well, is to believe what he's saying there is that there are craft that move at high rates of speed that defy the laws of physics does not bear historical precedent for breakthrough technology. So, for example, the atom bomb. The atom bomb, if you watch Oppenheimer, was theoretically possible in 1923 or so, with the discovery of the atom and Einstein and all of that. It was a practical engineering question That's why we were afraid that the Germans could do it. It's not that they had breakthrough research. It's that from an engineering point of view, splitting the atom, figuring out how to weaponize it, the practical implications were the hard engineering problem to be solved. It was both theoretical physics, but actually refining plutonium. All these were real questions about whether it was feasible as opposed to theoretically possible. There's nothing that exists in all of academia to suggest that. So to believe that this is some secret government program, Chinese, Russian, US, or any of that, you would have to believe that not only has the engineering been secretly done, that all the research from all the universities in the world had gone black, that it all happened top secret, behind the scenes. They were able basically to classify it from inception onwards. And there's just no technological breakthrough, that bears comparison. Like the car was an engineering problem and then a mass production problem. Even computers, graphical user interfaces, iPhones, all the things. They were implementation problems about how you can do this stuff at scale, whether you can really do it, prototype, etc. None of that exists in the academic research. So that's why, and if that's the only other plausible explanation, that actually is easier for me to dismiss, as opposed to this is all just fake and it's completely a psyop, these are fake videos and all that. But I don't think that really bears scrutiny either. That's where a lot of my certainty comes from. Now, some of this does also connect to a basic question of, look, he's either lying or he's not. And I've said this before. If he's lying, I want him to be prosecuted because he's wasted my time, he's wasted a lot of the nation's time. But behind the scenes, I don't think it's deniable to say that a cover-up of some kind is not happening. I don't know what they're covering up, but put this up there on the screen. This is from Liberation Times, a UFO-based outlet, but I've gone through and I've confirmed some of this myself, is that there is a big movement going on right now behind the scenes to actually go after the UFO transparency legislation that was slated to be enacted in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. It was called the UAP Disclosure Act. It was sponsored by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Mike Rounds. However, now there's pushback inside of the Senate Armed Services Committee led by Republican members of Congress, both on the Senate level and also in the House, in order to try and gut anything that would require the Department of Defense to simply disclose everything that they know for very specific questions, Krystal. So that's like my big meta take, which is at the end of the day, government transparency on this issue, what's the problem here?
Right.
What is the issue? Like, what are you covering up at the end of the day? On the JFK thing, it's the same question. We actually know what they're covering up because we
have a pretty good idea.
We have a pretty good idea of it. We just don't want us to see official confirmation. So that's kind of where I stand on the whole thing and how it connects also to what's going on in Washington right now.
And Congressman, new House Speaker Mike Johnson, one of the villains in this attempts to quash the transparency legislation. And just so people know, this legislative process, it should get a lot more attention and coverage. People use the National Defense Authorization Act to get all kinds of little, pet projects or things killed, whatever. They use this process in order to achieve that. So that's why this is being used as a vehicle to try to kill this transparency. I mean, on the whole matter, I guess I'm relatively agnostic. I do feel like me and most people are just going to need something more than one guy's word.
And you should.
Because it's not even, and this is something Rogan points to too, you could even accept that he's not lying, that he seems like a genuine, sincere person, but he's being used for some other end. Like, that is another possibility that's on the table. And in the absence of any sort of concrete proof of the things that he's discussing, it's, for me, I'm just going to need a lot more to believe something that is so incredibly extraordinary, which, I think is fair for not just for me, but for people in general. The other thing I was going to ask you about, Saagar, because I started to listen to some of the podcast, is there was a lot of like, well, I can tell you this, but I can't tell you that. What was his rationalization for why there were certain things that he could disclose and would disclose, and why there were certain things that he put out?
So he went through something, a pre-publication review, as he described it, and as I understand it too, having talked to people who've published stuff that had some classified information or not, you basically submit to everything that you want to talk about publicly to the DoD. They're not confirming it happened or not. They are allowed to then come in and say, nope, can't talk about that. You can talk about that. Everything that they don't X out, you are allowed to then publicly discuss. That doesn't mean that they're they're endorsing the claim. Let's not forget, though, that they did say that his accusations were credible and that they were urgent in terms of what he was alleging for his whistleblower complaint. This is from the Inspector General of the overall intelligence community. The reason why, when he's like, well, what did you say? He either did not receive clearance to talk about that subject, or he was told, no, you can't talk about that. So all of the things that he's saying publicly are things of which there is either publicly available reporting and he was cleared to discuss or not. I'll give you a good example. I remember a long time ago reading the book by Rob O'Neill, who's the guy who shot bin Laden.
Yeah.
And he was in SEAL Team 6. But in his book, he has to black out the word SEAL Team 6. Right? You can only say SEAL Team X. It's stupid. Everybody knows SEAL Team 6 exists, but they don't want to publicly acknowledge
it,
SEAL
yeah.
Team 6. No, so when he says, you know, I was in the SEAL teams or I was in this, he is not that, you know, and he removes the word 6. It's because he specifically did not receive clearance to say that word. A lot of them are like that. There's, you know, several other examples of these things. Even the bin Laden raid itself had all sorts of secrecy around it. And if you've ever read like Admiral McRaven's book, who talks about it, there's a lot of things in there too that you have to submit for pre-publication review. Again, they're not endorsing it. They're just like, there are some things which they do take out. Now, that's his explanation. Does it sound fishy and annoying? Yeah, it's annoying to listen to. I agree with everybody when he's like, no, I can't talk about this. Like, but that's what I want to know the most. So that's why I just come down on, okay, you got a whistleblower here, he testified under oath. He submitted all these claims to members of Congress. The 2 members of Congress who wanted to hear questions from him said, I want to hear everything you said is classified in a SCIF, which is a secure compartmentalized facility. Guess what? They won't give him SCIF access inside of Congress. Nobody knows why that is. Again, why? Let the man talk. Let the members of Congress hear it out. Our elected representatives exist for the very reason that they can investigate on our behalf. And if it's so secret, then they can go find out for themselves. If it's urgent, they can bring it to us. Second is the matter of transparency and of legislation. What harm possibly could be done by having transparency around non-human biological creatures? If they don't exist, then you can come out and say they don't exist. We have no evidence of that. And so there's a lot of reasons why I think this is trying to be quashed. And, you know, to bring it back to the Occam's razor, or sort of the other side of what it could be, secret government program and all that, you honestly would have to expect more competence from the government to do something like that than you would for covering up information, in my opinion. To secretly develop a Manhattan-style project as it relates to aviation with no knowledge, as opposed to keeping things secret for a long time. Now, the government is bad about both of those things, but I think they're a lot worse at proactive innovation in complete darkness and secrecy than they are at some sort of program that's been running now for generations in order to try and keep the truth from the American people and from the world. So that's where I come on the whole thing.
I don't know.
I've thought a lot about the government explanation. Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense as to how that's possible.
To me, almost none of it makes sense, because you're not just talking about a U.S. government cover-up. You're literally talking about a global cover-up, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not like all of these incidents are happening in the U.S. In fact, Grush is talking about things that are happening overseas himself. So you have to imagine that there's a global cover-up. Your objections to the idea that it's some like secret government technology that we have no awareness of, I think are also really founded. Right. So I'm just sort of like in a my hands thrown up. Let's have as much disclosure as possible and figure out what that was.
Well, and there's no downside. There's literally no downside to any sort of disclosure or transparency or investigation. If anything, the fact that they are trying so actively behind the scenes to try and kill the amendment. Christopher Mellon has also talked about this, former Assistant Secretary of Defense. I would only say like that tells you leaps and bounds. And even if it is some sort of secret aviation program and all of that, think about the commercial applications of such technology, then we should know about it, because that sounds, I was on a red-eye flight. It took a long time over this weekend. I'd love to be able to go at supersonic speed. So let's get it done. If that's the truth and that's the case, let the people who supposedly paid for it, let it pass. My last thing I'll say of this is the Pentagon officially failed its audit for the 6th time in a row as of 2 weeks ago.
Every time they've done an audit, they've failed it.
Right.
However many times that is.
Where's some of that money going? That's all I want.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.